I hate it.
To face some type of adversity, some challenges that you had to overcome.
I was very lonely. I was bullied mercilessly as a kid. Thinking back to just those moments of how lonely I was. One of the things they love to do is to tackle me and pour chocolate milk down on my face, down my throat, and stuff tater tots in my mouth, kick the shit out of me. It's begging them to stop. Like, I know I went through that because God has prepared me for this mission and for who I am to become. I would have to walk a lonely path in order to, bring about the mission that He has given me.
First of all, thank you for accepting my invite for this. It's not about me. This show is all about people who are struggling with the mindset, with self-sabotage, with imposter syndrome, with depression, with negative self-talk,
Yeah.
So I've been following you for a while, and we share a lot of the same belief system. I'm a man of God. I'm a patriot, even though I have this accent. No, I'm just-
That's right. Hey, usually people with accents are the most American, brother, because
Yeah.
they know what really immigrants, I believe, are the most American of all. I really believe that. I'm assuming, are you an immigrant, or did you come
Yeah.
here from a different country?
I'm an immigrant, and I agree with you because America is the only true capitalist country, the only free country. Every other country has some sort of control freak, or just the mob runs the country.
Hey, you know what? We're not far off from that, unfortunately. And it takes men like you to fight for that, right? To fight so we don't turn like these other countries have turned, because we have some control freaks leading us right now, man.
They're trying
is
to
a nightmare.
destroy. They're trying to destroy the values of America. The family values, the freedom, and you can tell, and I can tell, and it's rare for people who are born here to be able to find that contrast. But for people who run from communism, they can smell it from 5 miles away.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you about your parents, about your upbringing, and maybe even your parents' parents, because usually history kind of like the generations skip one generation, if and maybe your grandfather is closer to you than your father, or who knows, right? So I'm just very curious about them, all about legacy and passing on legacy, and I'm curious about your upbringing. So tell me about your parents and your grandparents.
Well, it's funny because I love that, by the way. I'll just get right to the point. I was blessed with the greatest parents of all. I was given the greatest gift of all. My mother, she just most incredible woman. She embodies what it means to be a woman who uplifts through caring and through, providing as a mother. She's just, she sacrificed everything and you saw it. She sacrificed her health and a lot of things to make sure we were taken care of course, But, like you asked me about this, it's going to get me teary eyed, bro, because my dad is my hero. That's a cliche. And I hate that that's a cliche. Actually, I love that. That's a good thing, I guess we should say. But I hate that it doesn't really carry the volume of the amount of love I have for my father. He truly has been more like not only my hero, but my best friend. He is the reason I am who I am, and more. I owe everything to him and who he taught me to be and how hard he was on me in the best way. My father, he's a man of God, a man of discipline and principle. And he wasn't a man who just spoke it. And he is an eloquent speaker. My father is one of the greatest coaches and speakers you'll ever find. Even though, what's funny, he never did it for money. He still to this day has never done it for money. He's only ever done it, in a way of service. But for me to see him and to be coached by him my entire life, I've seen him change other people's lives just out of pure service. And he's a man of God. He lived it. There was no lie the words that he would say, he lived what he taught. And that was the most incredible thing. So, but what's interesting about my father is that I never met my father's parents. Everyone on my father's side is based, almost everyone except for my aunt, his sister, almost everyone else on his side, I've never met because they're either dead, in jail, or I don't know, just in and out of prison, just druggy, just nothing. I never even met him. The only time they ever reached out to him was just trying to beg for money. And he was just this outlier in that family that refused to continue in that path. But on my mother's side, my grandfather are my grandfather and grandmother, the only grandparents I've ever known. And they, again, incredible people. My grandfather is actually a legendary college football coach.
Wow.
He 21 bowl rings. As a defensive coordinator for BYU when they won the national championship. As a matter of fact, this is actually something I keep with. This is one of those that he gave to me. This is one of those, the bowl rings is 1985 Holiday Bowl. And he has obviously so many of these, but I keep this, by me right here. Yeah, he's a legend. And he's a legend for a reason. Again, one of the greatest coaches to ever go through BYU. There are stories about that man. There are a lot of stories about him that I've heard over time. But if you're just asking strictly about legacy, I truly have been blessed with who I've been raised by and who I've been around. They've inspired in me for sure.
Did your father talk about his father at all, or during your upbringing?
No, because he did. He told me everything he had about him, but his father really kind of abandoned them when he was 11. Not much to tell, except for the fact that when my father actually, who ended up playing football in college at BYU, quarterback there, the whole story, is basically then he tried to reconnect with my father. My father was, showing success, but again, just didn't truly care about him, just cared about what he could do for him kind of thing. So they never, ever connected. And that was the last time he had spoken to him before he died.
So he was the first one from the whole family to choose to break the generational curse and be the exact opposite for you. And do you have any siblings or?
Yep, I got 4 other siblings. So there's 5 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 of us.
I assume he found God and he just followed the values of the kingdom. And
yes,
it's such a game changer.
Yeah, he's the definition of a man of God. I mean, he has given his life to service of others and to service to God. He is one of the most articulate men of scripture you'll ever find. I mean, the amount of study that, I would wake up every morning, like I'm saying every morning, because I had to wake up early for football or, waking up at like 5 or 6. And my father's already been up studying the scriptures on the kitchen table every day, constantly. And it was not just reading, studying, make it a habit to be able to teach principles of the doctrine of Jesus Christ and what's been given to us. So he truly, when we talk about found God, he is the definition, in my opinion, of a man of God.
The Bible says that there's no greater joy than seeing your kids walk in the truth.
Yeah.
You went for that. That's the guaranteed way to find joy.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any kids now or?
Not yet. Me and my wife, we're actually trying for kids right now. Yeah, we decided to start trying for kids. We have 2 dogs though.
Good exercise before the kids.
That's right. Good practice.
Good practice. I have a daughter that's almost 12 and
wow, congrats.
we're expecting our first son. I just recently got married last year. So
oh wow, congratulations.
It's quite amazing. I'll be praying for you and your wife.
Thank you.
Be gifted with this amazing joy. It creates like a natural motivation.
Yeah, I've heard. I can imagine.
So tell me about your childhood. Did you have to face some type of adversity, some challenges that you had to overcome, or did you have a pretty smooth upbringing?
Well, yeah. So from a perspective of what really we should consider a challenge, my childhood was very easy. In regards to what people actually suffer around the world, right? But, I will say I had a very lonely childhood. And I get asked this question a lot on these podcasts, and it's hard to talk about. I hate crying. I hate it. I was very lonely, bullied mercilessly as a kid. When I say my father was my best friend, he was my best friend. He was my only friend. Which for all intents and purposes, now that I'm grown and old, I look at that and say, what a gift. What a gift that I didn't waste time with loser kids. I spent time around my father. For me, greatest thing I ever had, was playing. I played catch every day with my father. I played every sport. I was always with him and he was always with me, but looking back, I was very lonely, right? I was very lonely. Even though I had my father, I was bullied mercilessly, My nickname today is the Bull, but my nickname growing up was the Fat Bull. So I didn't give myself this nickname. I just want to make sure it's very clear. I didn't, but I was the Fat Bull, almost on a weekly, sometimes daily basis going to school. That, one of the things they love to do was to tackle me and pour chocolate milk down on my face, down my throat, and stuff tater tots in my mouth, kick the shit out of me and say Fat Bull needs his milk, punch me in the stomach, whatever it was, right? Groups of kids, and I think what's hard is remembering, thinking back to just those moments of how lonely I was, begging them to stop, like begging. So yeah, I mean, in regards to like what I mean by in regards to, like that, it's not that, big fucking whoop, like I had chocolate milk being poured down my throat, like I still like chocolate milk, not that big of a deal, right? In regards to what people go through around the world, it's nothing, but to me it was hell, Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that has affected my life is how lonely I was. And honestly, today and what I still experience today with the hate, when the stance I take, it's not easy, but I know I went through that because God has prepared me for this mission and for who I am to become, that I would have to walk a lonely path in order to bring about the mission that he has given me. Yeah. I don't want, I don't want to get too deep in the sob story, So
I really appreciate your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you had to go through this growing up, and I grew up in a tough environment, and I rarely shared with my dad about the bullying. Did you bring it up to him? And basically, in my situation, it made me turn into a bully myself. So I didn't really have perspective from great leadership, So I found weaker people than me, and then I had to mature later on and realize that it's not good for either party. But because bullies usually are bullied at home, and they're hurt, so it's like a chain reaction that unfortunately causes emotional trauma that sometimes is following us for the rest of our lives.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. You're exactly right, but not everyone goes through that, right?
Right.
Not everyone experienced that, because here's the difference. I'm sure you've heard the dichotomy and the differentiation between a hero and a villain. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's very well known that the hero and the villain have the exact same story. Okay. The hero and the villain both have the same story, a very tragic upbringing. For the hero, he, is usually an orphan, right? We're talking like, think Superman, think Batman, think any hero there is. There's always a tragic upbringing, parents killed, orphaned, bullied, whatever it is, right? And the hero, and same with the villain always walks with in his step, a scar on his face, or whatever, right? Or some tragic upbringing. The difference is that the villain, looks at that and says, the world hurt me, so I'm going to hurt it back. And the hero says, the world hurt me, and I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen to anybody else. And so even though, especially as kids, if they're not guided, right, the natural reaction of the natural man is to seek revenge, and not to seek revenge, or more so to bring upon that same pain to others as some idle form of power that maybe we have more control over life than we think we do, right? And I do believe, I look at my life, if I hadn't been guided by my father, I don't know what would have happened. If I did not have the strong presence of my father and his guidance through the gospel and all this, I do wonder what kind of person would I have become, because he ingrained it in me very clearly that you will not be like that.
Well, the natural course of the world is it's eye for an eye, or you'll either try to gain some bravery to stand up to the bullies, or you would find weaker people. That's the natural flow without leadership. And how did you bring it up to your dad? Was it the first time when it happened, or it was?
No, it's not. It was no secret, like growing up, like it happened all the time. So it was almost a weekly basis happening all the time. And, it's funny because for years, it was like we were doing everything the way of like approaching the parents. Let's talk about this, right? Approaching the teacher, talking to the principal, right? Going through all the appropriate measures to let's, settle this peacefully. And what's funny about all that is it actually never, ever helped. It actually made it worse. And this has been going on for years, right? And everything changed on one particular day when I came home. Again, I just go to school, same thing. I'm running from these kids, begging them to stop. They tackle me, beat the shit out of me, pour chocolate milk down my throat, all this stuff, right? And I'll never forget, this day like changed everything for me, because I rolled over on my hands and knees, and what really hurts the most, even to this day, was sitting there and looking at it was on the playground, so I'm looking at all these kids watching. They were just watching. And I just know, I'll never forget just like crying, like I got chocolate milk all up in my hair and shit, bloody nose, whatever, and I'm just sitting, I'm like, why won't any of you help me? I looked at them and I knew they felt bad. Most of them were laughing, to be honest. They egged it on, but there were those who I saw that felt bad. They didn't like seeing it. And I looked to them and I was like, why won't you help me? Like I'm getting beat up by 5 kids, I was just begging for someone else to help me. I was so distraught. And I just walked home, because my house was pretty close to the school. And as I went home, my mother saw me. She was pretty frantic because this has been building up and happening a lot for years. And she was just freaking out today, this day. And I'll never forget, when my father saw me, like when he saw me, because my mom was freaking out. I was like, yelling, Joe, and so he came and he saw me. And there was something in his eyes that just snapped. I mean, it snapped. And it was just this pure anger and rage. But what I knew it wasn't at me. He wasn't angry with me. He was angry at the situation. But yeah, I knew like he was angry, right?
Yeah.
And he immediately pulled me away from my mother, took me into the other room, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, no one's coming to save you, but that's okay because you're all you need. You need to be Superman. So, he then proceeded to tell me that, he said, get out of my house and don't come back until you beat the shit out of one of those kids. And just kicks me out of the house and says, don't come back until you beat the shit out of him. And I left the house because to me, it's funny. I look back at that. I'm like, I don't think he really meant me. He probably would have let me back in.
Was your mom there or no?
No, he pulled me away from her. I don't think she would have approved.
But, Joe, what are you doing?
That's right. Yeah. So he just said, don't come home. And to me, it's like he gave me no choice. To me, I walked away and I had no choice. I can't go home until I do this. I look at that and he literally forced me into a situation where I had no choice but to face it. So I did. I puking on the way. I was so fucking scared, man. I went over to one of these kids' houses, knocked on his door. And his mom came to the door first, actually. She came to the door, I was like, and then he comes to the door and just out of pure rage and honestly, probably just not having any other choice, almost like my back's against the wall, just this, almost fight or flight, thing that I just grabbed this little fucker and I started beating the shit out of him right there on his porch. And then I started running home, after, because I thought I was going to go to jail or something, right? And I'm running home. But I tell you, the feeling that I had, I was so happy. And people, I've told this story a few times, and people actually don't like this part. They're like, you shouldn't feel good about that. I'm like, because if you've never known what it's like to face the demons in your life, if you've never known what it's like to overcome something that is dragging you down, making you not want to live, then don't fucking talk, because there's the greatest feeling of pride I've ever felt in my life. To this day, I lean on those feelings. I did it. All that fear, all that, hate, everything that lined up before that was gone. I could not wait to show the bruises on my knuckles to my dad. I was so excited about what had just happened. Finally, this feeling of belief in myself for the first time. And then my father, when I went home, I was showing him, I told him all about it. He told me he was proud of me, took me out for a Wendy's Frosty, right? But then he proceeded to ingrain in my mind from that day on that if you ever allow this, to be something that, that continues in your life, then you're a fucking hypocrite. He looked at me, he said, not only must you be great enough to defend yourself, but you have to become great so that you're never like those kids who just stood by and watched. Says if you ever end up like them, then you're a hypocrite for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. He said these words, be great or be nothing. And this idea of if you're average, if you just sit on the sidelines, you are the problem. And there's a doctrine that we could teach. It's the average life is the most selfish life you'll ever live.
Yeah.
Being average is selfish. Being great is selfless. Becoming someone who can actually not only defend themselves, but can stand up and defend others. We look to the heroes of our history as those who stood up for something.
Right.
They had enough courage. They had enough belief to stand up and do something about it. And there's a famous quote, actually many people have said this, from Albert Einstein, and Thomas Burke said something very similar. It's an ancient knowledge that's known that if you silence in the presence of evil is evil. We think that our neutrality and not making a decision to not get in the fight, somehow that makes us okay. But in reality, nothing could be farther from the truth. You are the problem, because The only thing necessary for evil to triumph in this world is for good men and women to do nothing. To do nothing. If you do all the devil has to convince you to do is to sit back on the sidelines and watch, retweet, and just be NPC on the sidelines. Just be someone who, isn't going to get in the fight because that's mean, right? People say I'm mean for beating up those kids for then getting into fights. Somehow I was labeled a bully afterward because of the fights I got into. Even though I was defending myself and defending others, I was labeled as a bully. But I knew what it stemmed from. I knew who I was. And I knew, and I'll never, ever forget, that if you are on the sidelines, you are the problem. If we're talking scripture, it says in the scriptures that the lukewarm, the Lord will spit you out of his mouth. What is the lukewarm? The lukewarm is this middle ground. You're neither hot nor cold. You're this middle ground average player who never fights for anything. The nature of truth and light is that it fights. It fights against the darkness. It fights against the lies. In order to have truth, there must be a division. That's why we call truth a sword, because it cuts, it divides. And when you stand for something, you stand for truth, you fight. That's why we call you a warrior of truth, a warrior of light, a warrior of freedom. You have to fight for principle. You have to fight to be courageous. You have to fight for faith. You have to fight for your family. It's a war. This is a spiritual war we live in. Whether we want to just talk about the spiritual war or the actual physical war that we fight, it's all the same. And it's those who are sitting on the sidelines who are just being average. They're the problem, because everything happening in this world that we hate to see, the truth is it's our fault. It only exists because we allow it to exist. If all of us had this mentality that we were willing to stand up and fight for what we believe, then evil would never dare show its face. Evil and darkness by nature is a coward. It's a coward. It's full of fear, and it loves to spread fear. But when faced head on, it is the most cowardly thing ever. It will retreat. It will only attack you if you turn your back to it. If you turn and face it, it will always run for you. That is the very nature of the elements of darkness and of the devil himself. They're cowards. They're full of fear. It is the opposite of faith. So if the opposite of faith is being fear, if you have faith, it means you fight. And if you have fear, it means you run. It means you hide on the sidelines. It means you are the one watching. And for me personally, and sorry I'm rambling here, but for me personally, I do a lot of work with a group called Operation Underground Railroad. Their founder, Tim Ballard, has become a very dear friend of mine. And what I have learned, and what I know everyone should learn, especially with that movie that just came out, The Sound of Freedom, that was their movie, right? I don't know if anyone has seen that. If you're watching this and you haven't seen it, go and watch it, right? But seriously, go and watch it. Educate yourself. Don't turn from the darkness, because it's real. The darkness is real, whether you like it or not. Just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean it's not there. Because let me tell you how dark this shit gets. There are children, millions of children, being kidnapped and sold into sex slavery. Little children are being raped 5 to 10 times a day by some of the most evil people ever. And this is happening on our watch. Yeah. This evil happens because we allow it to happen, because not enough people are willing to fight back, are willing to stand up for what they believe. We just think our thoughts and prayers are enough. It's not. It's not enough, and so that's why I feel so motivated not only to build a business and to build a brand where I can speak about these things, because if I don't, I'm a hypocrite for life.
Absolutely. And after the movie, I felt the same way, because my mission is to help God eradicate child abuse from the face of the planet. That's my life mission. And this is something that it's happening on our watch. And everybody knows. And it's so disgusting that part of the media is trying to minimize this. Everybody knows about the Epstein's Island. And everybody knows that there are names that could not be mentioned because they're in control of a lot of things. But to pretend that it's not happening, it's so cowardish,
Yes.
And out of all these controversial topics, if we talk about how Americans are losing their character, if you can visualize what American is the person that brings justice. Some people would say, no, that's the bully, some country that brings justice in the world. It's the country that fights injustice, is the people that fights darkness. I follow a lot of Navy SEALs, and they know exactly what life looks like in Afghanistan. And I have some friends, missionaries, that are in Afghanistan, and I know how dark that country is, and evil exists there. And if we don't go there, if brightness doesn't go there, they will continue for hundreds of years, So darkness exists, predators exist. Which topic, controversial topic right now, drives your passion out mostly? Is it the lack of character that we've adopted? Is it the child abuse and the sex trafficking? Is it the lie about COVID? Is it the freedom being stripped away, or gun control, or the transgender agenda? Which one, or the globalist agenda? Which one do you think is the highest priority right now?
That's a great question. Because that is also something that will actually get people into what we call a state of analysis paralysis by looking at how many things are wrong. It almost brings this feeling, oh, well, who am I? There's so many problems. Who am I? How can I take on all of these? Right. Well, number one, like you said, this is why it's such a great question. Pick one. You don't have to fight them all. Pick one. They're all connected, by the way. Pick one and fight for it. Fight against it. Right. But there's no doubt the greatest evil we face in this world, and this is the darkest of them all, is the child trafficking.
Right.
But here's the thing: is when you go down that road and you start talking about child trafficking, that is directly connected to these groups. The LGBTQ community is the most evil movement we've ever seen. I don't care if I get, taken off this. I don't care if people are offended by that. It's true. The LGBTQ community is one of the most evil movements to ever come across this world, not just nation, this world. It is an embarrassment to the truth. It is embarrassment to what it means to be a follower of Christ and to be a godly person. It is everything that represents this natural, immoral world. And somehow it's supposed to be celebrated. And if you dare speak against it, they will shut you up. It is everything that is not American. And it is also the gateway that has been chosen, the gateway to bring about hypersexuality and to bring about LGBTQ, and also pedophilia. I don't care what anyone says. It is the chosen gateway to bring pedophilia to the mainstream. Look at the new movement that they're doing, talking about MAPS, minor attracted person. This is not some conspiracy theory that people would accuse us of here. We're talking about them trying to soften pedophilia, saying, let's not offend. Hey, you know what? They're people too, and they just want to love. If you say that, then I know you're evil. No, I'm not evil. I'm loving. No. Evil always masquerades as an angel of light. Lies cannot exist on their own. They are manipulation of truth. The devil doesn't come at us with horns and fangs and evil. No tyrant has ever taken over saying, I'm evil and I'm going to rule you all. No, they always take over in the name of love and security. They will always manipulate the truth. And in the name of love, which is not love, in the name of love, they will push this hypersexuality agenda onto the world, onto children, to bring about their own pleasure. What could be more evil?
There's nothing more evil than that. And even in the Bible, it says, and Jim Caviezel says it in the movie about, I don't know if that happened in real life. You know Tim personally. If he actually told that pedophile, if he shared the verse with him that he's gonna be the bottom of the sea, tied up to a brick or something like that. But it could be a good question to ask him next time when you see him in person, if he actually said that to him.
I will. I'll actually text him right now. I'll text him.
Because he didn't get it, and a lot of those evil people, when you were talking about the truth, I think Jesus has two wings. One of them is truth and the other one is grace, because I love how you brought the analogy or the observation that evil people, heroes and villains, come from the same background, but there's good in the hero's heart, and they more strength not to allow this to be emotional trauma, and the others choose to be the victims and to blame the world, which is so dangerous, especially for people with power, people with resources, to have that victim mindset. It's extremely dangerous, and there's no other way but to fight it, and to sometimes, when you in the fight, if there is a change in intention, then grace is necessary. But if there's no change in intention, then you have to stand for good. And we are generals of God, and it's happening on our watch. And part of it is to fight. Part of our duty is to fight evil, not just to talk about it.
That's right.
Conviction. And that's why kudos to guys like Tim. And I also support Rescue One. They're out of Tennessee, and the government is not really wanting to help people like that. There's no really strong division, because such a big problem. Literally, it grew like 5,000% in the last 10 years. And I fly with my daughter. Nobody's asking me, she's 12. Nobody's asking me about passport, name, you might as well fly with her and you have no problem. There's no one on the airport asking you any questions about a child. And when we had this COVID BS with the masks, it makes it even more challenging. So it's insanity. And to stand up, I travel a lot for work, and I go to Georgia sometimes and these southern states, and I'm like, I live in Chicago, which is far left, and I say, you guys, when are you guys going to stand up? And they're like, well, why do you wait on us to stand up? And I'm like, because I'm not waiting on the north or all these left cities to do it. We're losing the battle. And when do you think people will have enough of this, and how does that revolution looks like? Does it happen online? Does it happen on the streets? What do you see as the next phase of challenging this evil? Because they're definitely getting momentum.
Yeah, they are. They are gaining momentum. There's no question. So in regards to your question of where does this take place? Well, the battle takes place, it's going to sound pretty obvious. The battle takes place where the battle is happening, right? So where the evil is, we go there. That's the thing. That's the truth. We don't wait for them to come to us. That's what I believe. That's what is the problem with everybody is we're waiting. We're waiting for them to throw that punch, that gives us enough reason to go after it. But we're sitting here. They're teaching this shit in elementary schools. They're pushing this so brazenly across, like all media, not just social media, not just the news. It's across all levels that they're pushing this and celebrating it. So at what point do the cowards realize, oh, we've been sitting back? So the difference of being a warrior and then someone who just fights out of pure obligation is a warrior goes to the fight. So where the evil is, we don't wait for the evil to come to us. We go to the battle. So wherever it's happening, we must go. This is why it's so important that all facets, like in order for us to actually fight this, we must take on the responsibility to fight it on all levels. Yeah. So I talk to people all the time. We're like, oh, I don't like social media. I don't like to get on it because it's so negative. I go, excuse me? It's your duty to be on there. It's your duty to go to the war, to go to the front lines, to get on social media and to fight the fight. This is like the reason why they're winning is because we're not standing up for it. The reason why YouTube gets away with, censoring stuff like this or Instagram or whatever it is because not enough people push back. And I believe we're realizing that in a small way when we see these, boycotts of Target and Bud Light, that's great, but it's time to take that to a whole nother level. Right? Uniting our voices to against it where the battle is actually happening. So if it's happening on Capitol Hill, then we must talk about it in Capitol Hill with our politicians. If it's happening on social media, then it's our duty to fight the fight on social media, right? So at whatever level, it's important to go to the fight. So that it's a great question you're asking because people are like, well, what do I do? Get in the fight, speak the truth. And guess what? There might be consequences. There might be, they might throw some punches back at you. They might attack your character. They might create lies about you. Dude, I threw AlphaCon. I threw this huge event. I had people calling the hotel trying to get me canceled, claiming I was the leader of a murder cult. I'm not kidding. Like I had to prove to the hotel that this is not a murder cult. It was crazy. The way they will attack you it'll shock you. And yet, guess what? It's still your responsibility to fight. You can't expect to get in the fight and not get scratched up. That's what being a warrior means. All of us need to accept the fact that this is going to get ugly. Right? Yeah. It's going to get ugly. And it's not going to get ugly because we made it ugly. And by the way, they will accuse us of that. I know something you said and something I've said is they will accuse you of being a bully. Just like America, they accuse America of being a bully when America goes into, Afghanistan and fights, terrorism or fights for these things. And again, you can get into the whole details of who's right and who's wrong. And I definitely don't think our government is a righteous government anymore. But
besides all the reasons why they're going in there, because there's bad intention, but I know for a fact that the American soldiers are the only ones in the past 30 years trying to educate the locals and give them, whether it's the Bible, they don't even care if it's the Bible or the Quran, but anything that teaches some sort of values and teaching them how to read, to open their eyes so they could stand up for their own freedom. So even though the soldiers have been brainwashed or the soldiers have been misled to go there for whatever reasons the leaders have, they still have good heart and they're still compassionate and empathetic to what's happening there. And that's why there's so many soldiers that come back here and they realize that it was all a scam and they have to deal with the consequences. But man, why does it seem like there's many people who are passionate and angry, but they don't move to the next phase of taking action in their business,
Mm.
or until something happens to them personally, until something. No, I mean, it feels like people, because the way they do it in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, they would, it's so difficult for unity, that people kind of have a very small circle, and once we cross that line, they would attack back. But until that line is attacked, they're passive.
Mhm.
And it feels like people are standing up when they're actual beneficiary of this attack. So if it happens to their kid in school, they will go into school and attack, not attack, but look, ask for explanation.
Mhm.
And but if you observe this happening in somebody else's school, and you see that it might happen to your school as well, then why don't we take action? Because we see it's coming. It's kind of like, see that the enemy is coming and don't prepare.
Yep. If you are prepared, you shall not fear. There you go. I love it. Yeah, I love it. I love that. So what do we do, right? I get the question is like, how do people, why don't they do it? Number one, they do it because they're cowards. They do it out of fear of what other people might say, right? The only weapon that the adversary really has against us is fear. That is the only thing. He cannot physically hurt us, right? And even if we were to physically get injured, that is nothing. And if we truly have, an eye single to the glory of God, we understand really what this war is about, truly, then all things other than the fight don't matter, right? Like physical harm, whatever it is, there's a higher purpose to all this, right? But the reason people don't get involved is because they're cowards. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to, get hate on social media or online, right? They don't want to offend people. They convince themselves that somehow their silence and their passivism is somehow a form of virtue. It's not. It's evil. Your passivism is evil because, again, silence in the face of evil is evil. It is a decision to allow evil to persist and exist. There's a famous quote. If you're talking about Europe of all places should never ever forget what happened with Nazi Germany in the takeover. And there's a very famous, I don't believe it was Victor, I forget what poet was, but if Nazi time, where he says, first they came for the socialists, and I said nothing because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the communists, and I said nothing because I'm not a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I am not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. We think it's somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
We put it off and justify as in, why should I get involved? Not my fight. That's the justification. I know for a fact that those kids had, when they watched me get the shit kicked out of me, they thought,
That's exactly what I was going to bring up.
exactly. Is it my place?
It's the same situation you were describing as you were being bullied. It's like we see that this is happening in California, in New York, in Chicago, and it's only a matter of time until it comes to your town. So the families that can't fight this narrative, are thinking, guys, why aren't you helping out? This is maybe not happening in Texas yet. Maybe it's not happening in Tennessee, but it's happening here, and we can't stand against the narrative. We don't have enough manpower. My daughter was in second grade. She's going to be in sixth grade. In second grade, when they served her in the best school of the district, it was public school, they served her a book with two genderless rabbits, and it's kind of like you choose your gender. And I went talked to the principal, and I was like, "Are you serious? Like, you're gonna give this to my daughter without even asking for my opinion?" And he was like, "Dude, this is way above me. Like, I have no say." And I'm like, "Yes, you do. It's happening on your watch. It's like, you're allowing this, you're tolerating this. If you're a true steward to your profession, you're gonna stop this. If you don't allow the teacher to lead where these kids should go, then they're not real teachers." And he was like, "Well, I'm powerless." So then I had to move her to a different school, and now she's in private Christian school. But very soon they're gonna have to submit to financials and economical things, and homeschool would be the only the only choice.
Yeah.
And we're paying taxes for this stuff. We're paying highest amount of taxes.
Yeah.
And if it's happening here, but it's not happening in your town, which means you're not getting beat up, but you might as well be in my position tomorrow. So why aren't you helping? It's basically the same call, same cry out that you had.
Well, this is the key point here that people miss, is that when they're faced with evil in the moment, when they're faced with evil in the moment, they will say, this is not my fight. This is not my expertise. This is above me, those kind of things. And I want it to be very clear to everybody who listens to this, your excuse in the moment when something happens that you are not prepared will not be sufficient in the eyes of God when you give him the excuse, why did you not fight? Here's a perfect example. If you're physically unfit and then you see something happening, say a man is, let's really a realistic scenario that actually does happen all the time around the world, which is very unfortunate. A man is raping a woman. Man is raping a woman. Actually, I'll even just give a real life example, something that almost brought tears to my eyes. I couldn't believe it. The man in France who ran around a playground stabbing children. Did you see that video?
No.
Oh yeah, no, it's a video. I reposted it. Oh, and of course Instagram took it down, right? They wouldn't let it be posted. Censorship to the max. But there's a man in France who mass murdered, I think it was 7 children with a knife because they don't have guns there, right? So gun control. He ran around a playground and stab children. And as I watch that video, you know what I see? And I watch any video of people getting mugged, women, getting abducted, whatever it is. There's a whole lot of people with their phones out recording.
Wow.
There's a lot of people watching. And there were men in that video watching. And so the question that we need to be asking ourselves is, well, it's not their fault that he did that. You know what? It is your fault that you allowed it to happen because of your lack of preparation. Like your shirt says, your lack of preparation and foresight will be held against you because you did not have enough care to prepare and to sacrifice for those moments. Your inability to be physically fit to fight back is your fault. And it was the choice you made for the few years before of you eating that shit with the ice cream and the sugar and the cookies. And then you just, engorging in pleasure and never sacrificing to exercise and prepare. It will be held against you. And we think in that moment, oh, I'm not prepared. Well, you know what? It's your fault. And let's talk financially. Well, you know what? People will sit here and say, I don't have the financial means. Well, it's your responsibility to develop the financial means. This is why I created programs to teach people how to make more money because you need to make more money. You need to learn how to have a job to make money that's not just your job because then you're not controlled. You're free. You're a sovereign human being who can stand for something. Too many times people, especially with COVID-19, people didn't stand up against COVID-19 because they were unprepared. They did not want to lose their jobs. They went along with it. And it was because of their lack of preparation that they were unable to fight the fight. And that is not an excuse. You must prepare. You must take responsibility today and yesterday and forever for the responsibility to fight against by any means necessary. So if that means training with guns, if that means physically being fit, if that just means being an well-educated person on what's actually happening, if that means financially that you can actually be someone who not only can not be controlled by some corporate oligarchy or whatever it is, right? You are free. And it's through your preparation that you become free. But the problem with freedom is that it takes sacrifice. Freedom is not free. There's a heavy price to pay for your preparation. And people don't want to hear that, but it's true. And they need to understand that you will be held accountable, not only for your lack of action, but for your lack of preparation. And so everyone listening to this should realize I must act today for the day I pray that never comes.
It's this preparation for man is something that it's completely rare nowadays because I believe that they're evil. Like you said, we have authority over the enemy. So the only thing the enemy could do is lie and cheat and deceive. So we've been lied to, and I think it starts with just having a fatherless world. Just edging God out of man, and the fatherless world creates orphan mindset, and the orphan mindset is chasing material stuff, chasing different things and artificial love because the true love is not there. So men chase artificial love and they fall for masturbation and porn and not working out, not developing themselves with books and wisdom, being soft, crying, not being able to handle their emotions. They can't control their emotions, and all this is now acceptable in the world. And it's kind of how the world is teaching men. And when men grow up fatherless, they get that push from the world to become soft and toxic masculinity, all these new terms that have never been in terms in history before, and all these toxic muscular men have saved the world on multiple occasions, but now all of a sudden they're the villain. So men need
this is exactly why I literally named my business Alpha.
we need more alpha.
You know what? You know what's so funny about that word? I teach people, hey, it's your God-given duty to be an alpha. People, oh, like they like think about this word. They're like, what do you mean, be an alpha? Like you have been so corrupted by the world that you would literally reject that word. What does it mean? Let's talk about what it means to be an alpha. Alpha is one of the most sacred words that you could ever speak. The word alpha is ancient. It is eternal. God declared himself as the Alpha and Omega, and people thought, oh, that means beginning that. It means more than that. It means you are the creator of an order amongst the chaos. You create control and you create security for your generations. You are a warrior against the darkness and chaos when you are an alpha. When you're an alpha, you protect, you provide. When you're an alpha, you're strong. You're disciplined. Let's talk about these words and what it means to be an alpha. And that's why I named my company Alpha, because anyone who's offended by that word, I know you're not for me. You will not like what I have to say. But if you hear the word alpha and say, yes, I need to be an alpha, and you reject this idea from the world that that's bad, that it's toxic. You want to know something funny? I just tweeted this today. If toxic masculinity were real, then it would be very apparent for us to see that, because then children who grow up without fathers would be a lot better off statistically. Children who grew up in a home that had no fathers, so there's no masculinity, no toxic stuff there. Children who grew up without fathers would be a lot better off. But it's the complete opposite. Nothing could be farther from the truth that children who grew up without fathers have the biggest struggle, or fall into to the loops of chaos more than ever. 70% of all prison inmates come from fatherless households. Why is that? How could that possibly be if it was so toxic? It's not toxic.
Yeah. Highest suicide rate are fatherless. And not only that, when man and the perception of what a man is supposed to be is being attacked,
yes,
then there are more fatherless children, even with a father. So if you put 1,000 men together in a room, 990 of them have a very complicated relationship with their father. The father wasn't there as the alpha. He wasn't there to discipline them. You know what I mean? What your father did for you would be right now something he could go to jail for. You know what I mean? It could be considered child abuse. And it's so sad that it's been edged out of the family, and there are many fatherless children that had a father. He just wasn't there as the alpha. And the definition of discipline is pretty harsh. It's like to correct with punishment certain behavior or code being broken. That means you have to punish someone who's not being disciplined. It sounds harsh, but the word self-discipline is freedom. It's to continue to evolve and fight to become the elite version of you, regardless of the people and the things that are going to try to drift you away from that focus. So that means in order for me to become an alpha, I will have to fight everyone and everything. So it's self-discipline is way better than discipline. But if you don't have discipline, it's really hard to develop self-discipline. And that's why military man, I had a friend who was kind of wild. We were doing some crazy stuff, and he got a DUI early on, like when he was 18. His father told him, you either go to the Marines or you go to jail. Which one do you prefer? He went to the Marines. 6 months later, he came back completely transformed. And he's been transformed since then. So he went there, extreme discipline. He was like, man, that works. I like that version of me. And now he's self-discipline. So discipline is necessary to take charge of your own life. And if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anyone else. You can't lead your children. You can't lead your son. You can't lead anybody if you're part of this narrative of killing the family, literally, which is the most genius design by God.
Well, I mean, what better way to destroy a country, destroy, society than to destroy the family? I mean, the family is the cornerstone of our existence. It's not just the cornerstone of society. It's the cornerstone of our existence, of who we are as sons and daughters of God. And by the way, it's important to understand when we talk about sons and daughters of God, people, again, another cliche people talk about, I want people to really understand what that means. If you were created in the image of God, you are a son or daughter of God. It literally means that your soul is eternal, that you will exist and have existed forever, that even after this life, you will continue to exist forever, which by definition, you exist outside of space and time. You are here in this world and you are getting a worldly experience in the natural world, but you exist outside of space and time, which means you are a God. Small, lowercase g, but still, you are by definition a God. because you are a source of light. You are a source of truth. You are a source of power. How the hell is your body pumping, what is it, 100 million liters of air a day? How is your heart pumping millions of liters, gallons of blood every day without you even thinking about it?
Yeah.
What is that eternal engine? Yeah, exactly. What is that eternal engine inside of you that's powering everything? And by the way, it powers everything. It is our souls that provide the light of this world, is who we are. We are creators. That is who we are. And in the highest form of creation, the highest form of creation is to create children, to create families between a man and a woman. Nothing else. Man and man, woman and woman, all of it's wrong. Between a man and a woman is how we create, and we create families. We create life. We are creators. And that is the designation of what this world is about, what our life is about, and to fight to protect it, to establish order. By the way, establishing order, another way to describe that is to establish discipline. Discipline being, the root of discipline is to be a disciple of. To have discipline in your life is to have structure. And who creates structure? An alpha. An alpha is the head of an order, is the head of an organization, whether that's a family, a business, whether that's just whatever they're appointed over, their mission, their life's purpose. That is what it means to be an alpha. You are the head of an order, an organization, to fight against the chaos. And based on how much light and power you have, your expansion of your order is a fight against chaos, is a fight against evil itself. To create discipline is to create order. It is to create freedom. And that is who we are as creators. And we want to attack this idea. Of course we would, because how else would you destroy everything? If there was a large group of united, strong alphas, again, man or woman, whether you're the head of an order, doesn't matter. Alpha doesn't have to just be man. Alpha is the head of an order, meaning what you are appointed over. So what you are appointed over is your order. And that is what we don't understand. And if we live in that power of who we really are, and we're united in this sense of who we are, who we can become, that is a dangerous thing. Dangerous to who, by the way? Dangerous to the people who we wanted to be dangerous against. Dangerous to the darkness. Dangerous to the adversary. Dangerous to the people who would seek to destroy it. Could you imagine trying to conquer a group of strong-willed, disciplined people? Could you imagine?
You can't.
You can't. It's impossible.
And guess who's not a creator? The enemy.
Exactly. Impossible for them to create.
The only way for him is to trick us.
To manipulate.
And we've been getting tricked. But look, the informational age and all this technology, unfortunately, sometimes God takes something evil and uses it for good purpose. So the more information we get, the more they're getting exposed, and the more we learn who we actually are. And if you don't mind, I just want to share the traits of orphan mindset, because you brought it up, and sonship.
Yeah.
So the orphan operates out of insecurities, and that's why it's ego. It's not confidence, it's ego, which covers fear. The orphan is jealous of the success of the brother or the sister. The orphan serves God to earn the father's love. Orphans have love, deprived heart, and they have to work for the father's approval, and that's why there's different relationship with God. The orphans try to medicate his deep internal alienation through physical stimulation. The orphan is driven by the need for success. The more money I have, the better social standing. The orphan uses people as objects to fulfill their goals. The orphan has issues with anger and fits of rage. The orphan is always in a competition with others. So we're creators, we're not competitors. And the orphan has a lack of self-esteem. The orphan receives their primary identity through material possessions next to their physical appearance and activities. So you work out hard, and you know the feeling when you go beyond your potential, when you think this is my threshold and you completely smoke it. That's confidence. No one can take that away from you. Lack of self-esteem comes from not doing the work, not showing up. So this is what we're fighting against, right? Here are the traits of sonship. A son or daughter functions out of love and acceptance. A mature son is committed to the success of his brothers and sisters. The mature son serves God out of sense of divine acceptance and favor. A mature daughter or son walks in the joy and presence of the Lord for comfort. No matter what, you must rejoice. The Spirit leads some to bless the kingdom. So this is how we bless the kingdom, by fighting the blasphemy. And mature son and daughter attracts their children. The spirit of sonship or daughtership rests in the father's ability to control and guide their future. The spirit of daughter and son is always blessing others. The spirit of sonship or daughtership walks in love acceptance of the father. A son or daughter has their identity grounded in their belonging in the father's affirmation. So it's basically what you just shared with us. And we need to find our true identity, which is in God. Spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think the meaning of life is it's Mark 4, it's testing our character. That's what God wants to see. What are we made of? Are we going to say the truth no matter how scary it is? Are we going to stand against what God hates? And are we going to do what God loves? It's not a secret what he loves and what he hates. How can we just pretend that this is normal? It's
Out
not.
of fear, lack of faith.
So this is the test of our character. It's a scary thing to stand up, but the Bible shows us like the biggest sinners are Paul and Peter. I mean, Peter told Jesus, "I will die for you. I will not let them kill you." And the accent gave him away. Oh, you sound like the guy from Nazareth. No, I don't. So even the truth and the grace, it's his wings. Paul raped women and killed children and set churches on fire. He was terrible, and a quarter of the Bible is written by him, and we quote him today. And it's just God wants to give us hope that it doesn't matter how far we go into this brainwash, because the enemy knows what our gift is, and that's what he attacks. That's where he builds the shame. Because if we approach that shame and approach that fear the same way you did, if we stand up against evil and darkness, then we find our purpose. Then we find our true identity. And what we're most ashamed of, what we're most embarrassed about, what causes the biggest pain, it's where we can tap in and embrace that and find who we truly are and what we're made of.
Well, I mean, I just want to add to that because you're exactly right. But what you're talking about, and to me, I've said this many times, the greatest accomplishment of your life is to discover who you really are and then live accordingly. That is the greatest achievement in your life, because you can never, number one, you can't discover who you truly are without God, because who you truly are is you perfectly aligned with the light, meaning aligned with God himself. When you discover God, you discover who you are. So number one, to truly know who you are. And I don't think people really get what I say, get that. Because if you really understood that, you would live your life with so much more meaning, purpose, joy, and fulfillment. Knowing who you are is also knowing your purpose, your foreordination, your calling in this life. When you know who you are, there's no other choice but to live either according to the light or to deny it all entirely, right? So the power that comes from God, the power of knowing who you are, the power of I am, that's a very important phrase, the power of knowing who I am, the great Jehovah, the great I am. That's the power of God himself. That is the light of knowing who I am. When you know who you are and you have gained that knowledge, most people, not even most, almost everyone does not truly know who they are, because when you come to know who you truly are, you ascend, you transcend this world in of itself. Knowing who you are, that is the center of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the gospel that has been given to us by all the prophets, to learn who you are. And on the reverse side, from the devil and from the darkness, what is the nature of darkness in of itself? Is self-hatred, self-destruction. If anyone, there's stories, and people can deny this if they don't really believe it, but if you ever hear a story of someone who's become possessed by a devil, what happens to them? They scratch themselves. They claw at themselves. They hate themselves. The devil hates himself more than anyone else. It is self-hatred that is the nature of darkness. And look at how he tries to destroy us, whether it's through drugs, pornography, any form to destroy us, for us to hate ourselves. That is where we are brought to the lowest of the low in darkness and depression, and this feeling is to hate who we've become, to hate ourselves. That's the nature of darkness, is self-destruction, self-hatred, and also imposter syndrome. This feeling of, who am I? This shrinkage. The greatest sin is to think less of yourself, which is why actually this whole idea, like the gospel itself, a lot of times is skewed when people talk about you should be humble. You know what? you should be proud. You should be full of pride of who you are. And you should live accordingly, because here's the difference. In actually ancient Israel, before in Old Testament times, it has become corrupted over time. But really, the idea of confessing your sins wasn't actually spoken as confessing your sins. It was taught as confessing your greatness. Because when you confess your greatness and you declare your greatness, you are now held accountable. Because a king, a God, someone who lives in the light, is held to a higher standard than someone down here who talks less of themselves, saying, I'm a worthless worm, yada, yada, yada. You know, like when you're a worthless worm, not much is expected of you. When you've destroyed even who you are by thinking less of yourself and tearing yourself down, this idea, this construed idea of humility is wrong. And this destruction, again, someone who just, I suck, you know, or they're just always just beating themselves down. That's not humility. Because the person who's always, you know, on their face, you know, when they kneel before God, they're always begging to everyone. That's not humility. The greatest act of humility and meekness is to be great beyond all measure and still bend the knee to God. Still give your will to him. Still say, thy will be done. When a king bends the knee to God, when Christ himself said, thy will be done, the greatest of us all, he who lived this life with no sin, still said, thy will be done. That is humility, not this other thing of self-destruction. Christ, if we learn from him and we learn from these people, when he declared that he is the Christ and he declared, I am. This is the power of God himself, the power of faith and knowledge and belief, right? Because you said the word confidence. We're talking about the power of the son, or the idea of the son. Again, we are the son. What is a son, right? And not the orphan, the son. And we who have a father we have confidence. What is confidence? Break it down. It's confide. If you speak any Latin language, you know confide means to have faith in, meaning with faith. Mm-hmm. And faith, we know, is to believe. Break down belief. Be living in, believing, be living in. These are the roots of the Latin words. If we really just take it down, understand what is the true meaning of these symbols we call words, it means to live in the light, to live in a knowledge of who you are. That is faith. That is light. That is power. And that is what God begs of us. Every father, true father, begs his children to be great, begs his children to become the greatest version of themselves. That is a loving father. That is why God is our loving father. That's who he is. He wants us to become. He foreordained us to become. And that is our mission. That is our purpose in life. That is every symbol of God and his gospel that points us to who we are. And this other idea is the idea of self-destruction, self-hatred, and everything else with pleasure and the lies that and manipulations that come from the side of chaos and darkness are all to destroy who we are. Notice the great spiritual war we're in today is this crazy battle of identity.
Yeah.
Oh, I identify as they, them, It is a battle of identity, because there is no identity in Christ. There is no identity in light and truth. It's identity in sex. What you prefer in sex is your identity. You get to create whatever identity I want. I identify as they, them. Of course, the great spiritual war of our day, of the last days, would be a war of identity, because at the end of the day, that is the essence of life itself, is knowing who you are, living in faith and confidence, in pride, and knowing who you are. When you have that kind of pride, when you have that kind of faith, then the world, you are not of the world at that point. You reject the world and the natural man, and you have ascended to a higher level. And by the way, the world will hate you for it. The world will hate you for believing yourself, for standing up for yourself, for becoming who you're meant to become.
I agree with everything you say. The only confusing part is pride is what leads to our demise, and that's what led the devil to be thrown out. So you must have two meanings of that word.
This is exactly that's exactly the point. The greatest truths are always surrounded by the most lies and darkness. The most important truth, of course, it wouldn't just be out there for us. The devil will surround that truth with the most lies. Mm-hmm. That's why humility and the idea of pride has been so misconstrued. And we think of pride as if it's wrong.
It's the main reason why we don't stand up.
Exactly. That is why we don't stand up. If he can convince us that we're nothing, if we can convince us that we can't make a difference, that who the hell are you? Notice the attack that the world and the devil does on you when you stand up, when you start your business, when you bet on yourself. Even friends and family will look at you and go, who do you think you are?
Exactly.
It's this attack on you and your character and who you are. So this idea of pride, we are attacked with this like, oh, I don't want to be a prideful person. You don't, because there's only one way to be full of pride. And what was the pride of the devil? If we learn from the scriptures that Christ was the greatest of us all. And by the way, so was Lucifer. Lucifer was the son of the morning. He was one of the greatest of us all before this life. And when they were presented before God, they both presented their plan. And Christ's plan was to give the glory to God. The devil's plan was to give glory to me, to put himself above God. Christ was greater than all, and yet still bent the knee before God.
He wanted to make his father proud. Yeah.
That's it. That's humility. And that's the only difference. Nowhere in the scriptures does it teach that I have to be humble to you or you humble to me. It only teaches us that we must be humble before God. I don't have to have humility around people. I have to have an eye single to the glory of God. And that's why my pride is so important, because I have pride. We all should have pride, because we should look at this world and reject it. We should think ourselves better than this world. Don't you think that's something that would be attacked? Oh, you think you're better than me? Who do you think you are? Especially when you say, I'm better than that. You're prideful. They're going to attack you and say, who do you think you are? You're full of pride. You need to humble yourself. Exactly. No. You need to be more full of pride, because someone who knows who they are will act accordingly. Someone who knows they're a king and knows that they're a God, that they're a son of God, would never stoop to that level, would never partake in those things. I am above this world. I am greater than this world. And it is in that power that I will reject this world, and no one can tell me who I am other than God himself. And that kind of pride, quote unquote, is the exact way the world will attack you and try to tear you down for who you are. And yet at the same time, you must be proud. You must be full of pride. In order to be full of pride in who you are, you must have light and faith. That's the difference. And this is what has been so misconstrued. And of course, this truth, this eternal principle of power and light has been so demonized. This toxic masculinity. Let me ask you something. When you're full of pride, how do you walk? Naturally, you stand like this. You stand with your chin up and you say, I am better than this. If you're humble, we typically think of this.
Hunched over like a hyena?
Yeah, exactly. Meekness. This is not meekness. It's a lie. Meekness, the definition of meekness is greatness beyond all measure, but still bending the knee to God. Glory to God and still serving him, our King, our Creator. He is who we serve. And that is the measure of greatness. That is the measure of light and power. A father who wants his child to wants his sons or daughters to be better than him.
Yeah.
But in order to achieve power, you must first bend the knee. I don't bend the knee to you. I don't bend the knee to any king. I'm a sovereign, free individual. I bend the knee to one being, and that is God Almighty.
That's it.
Everything else, I am above.
And that's what, meekness is one of my favorite words, meek, to be meek.
We think it's weak. It's the same word. We think it's weakness.
David is one of my favorite characters, and he didn't care who Goliath is, because he knew who God is.
Yes.
And there's nothing stronger than God. So Jesus was meek, no matter how scary it looks like, no matter how unfair and how unjustified. It's a very powerful word, to be faithful, to be meek. Yeah. We're serving the creator of the universe.
Yes.
We're his children. So
we are created in his image. We have the same power within us. Why would we ever think less of ourselves? Think about when Christ taught to the Pharisees, how did they attack Christ? The Savior of the world, how did they attack him? Who are you? They attacked his identity.
Yeah.
They questioned who he was. And Christ declared in those moments who he was. And you know what they probably whispered to themselves? Man, he's really prideful.
Who does he think he is?
Yeah, exactly. Who do you think he is? And you know what? They do say this at the end when he said they challenged his identity as the Son of God. They said, if you really are the Son of God, prove it. Mm-hmm. That was their challenge. Their challenge wasn't always on his words. They challenged who he was. And in all that, he had to stand in the power of knowing who he was. Knowing who I am, the power of I am. The word Jehovah, by the way, from Hebrew means Yahweh, which actually is I am. The power, the great I am, the great being, the great I am. That is the power that all of us are commanded, not just guided, commanded to live in. That is the power of faith. And if you have that kind of power, that is what we call integrity. It's called light. It's called truth. It's called power. And when you have that kind of power and will, and you're aligned with God, when you speak, even the elements will obey. When you know who you are, this is what I mean by the greatest gift you could ever receive is knowing who you are. Because when you know who you are and you live in that power and light, you command all things. You have dominion over all things here on this earth. And you realize who you are, and you would never stoop as low as to pornography. You would never stoop as low as to homosexuality. You would never stoop to these levels of pleasure that the world would teach you is okay. You instead live in a life of discipline, a life of I am better than those things. And how dare you say you're better than anybody? Isn't that one of the attacks they say? Oh, you think you're better than me? Yeah.
Guess what we're playing with? We're risking eternal life. We're risking falling for the worldly traps and eventually being controlled by something. Yeah. Even the smartest and the most brilliant man lose the battle with alcohol sometimes and drugs.
We sell our inheritance for a pot of porridge. Right. Just from the very beginning, right? He sold his inheritance for a pot of porridge, for a immediate pleasure of this world. He sold everything.
And that's why it's so critical for us to share the gospel. It's so critical to use our platforms to share the gospel, because it's our main duty to wake men up.
Yes.
Do you think that alphas are born this way, or could you train an alpha?
Oh, it's easy to train an alpha. Everyone's born with the light of Christ inside of them. Everyone's born with this power inside of them that has dominion over all things. If you're a human being, you are given this power. So all you have to do is teach someone how to tap into that power. That thing's turned off. Is teach them how to discover who they really are. I can teach anyone this. The question is if they have the courage to listen, is if they have the courage to act and never drop the sword, never give up the fight of who you really are. I can teach anyone this. And it's not something you teach them to develop. You don't have to teach them to develop anything. You have to teach them to tap into what's always been there. From the beginning of time and before time ever was created, we existed. We are eternal. We are gods. We are created in the image of God himself, the King of the universe. And if you can really come to an understanding of that, every human being has this inside of them. And I believe in an infinite universe that's created, infinite domain of our creation. Every single one of us can be our highest form and our highest power, because there is no limit to what we can create in an infinite world, an infinite universe. That is the beauty of what has been given to us, not only in this life, but in the life after.
Yeah.
Everyone can tap into this power. No one is born without it. And that is, again, the foolish thing for us to believe, is that only some are alphas and some are not. Oh, well, really, definition of alphas is the 1%. Wrong.
We all have it.
We all have it. And if we all tap into it, guess what happens? We have peace. We have greatness. We have light and truth. If we all tap into this, it's not me versus you. It's me versus me. It's me becoming who I'm meant to be. And in an infinite universe, if you believe in an infinite universe, if you believe that God created infinite opportunities, so you don't have a scarcity mindset, you have abundance, you believe in abundance, then guess what? You know that there's enough in an infinite world, meaning infinite, right? Eternal, even more so than infinite, that there's enough for all of us to expand into our highest form of power and not have to tear others down. I don't have to tear you down in order for me to become. I don't have to do that. I can become. And guess what? As a matter of fact, the way I become a lot of times has to do with me helping you and me giving myself in service to others, because that is how God has taught us to do so.
Yes, that's a true sonship. It's the son celebrates the success of his brothers and sisters, because we are serving an abundant God. We're not serving a broke God or limited God. Right. We're serving a God of abundance, and it's literally limitless. Yes. But the enemy is lying and creating that scarcity, that it's unethical to live an abundant life. But it's actually a blasphemy not to. And even God is protecting us from that. He tells us not to believe the world and not to even believe ourselves, because he knows that we could be programmed and brainwashed and misled. And he says, only trust me. Just like you would tell your child, if you know your child is in a questionable environment, you would say, do not follow anyone's advice. Do not listen to your teacher. Do not listen to that's what good parents tell them right now. If your teacher tells you anything about your gender and whatever, do not trust them. Trust only me. And because we know we want the best for our children, and just like the Lord wants the best for us. But the enemy, we have authority over him. How do you turn what is obviously we all get attacked. Even Jesus was attacked many times.
Mightily.
I feel like what you're talking about, that insane connection with the Lord, is to know your identity, not to believe, but to know your identity, and to have authority over demons, to have authority over the mouse with the microphone. What are some of the things that you do when you get attacked? Like, for example, I start speaking in tongues. I start praying in tongues, and it happens for me. Or I learn how to catch it early and be like, oh, nice try. I'm not falling for that. And what are some of the things that you do in when you get attacked, especially sometimes when you're going in the right direction and you're in that super sync, and that's when we get attacked? Usually we stop for a second, we pause, we don't move with the rhythm. That's why he says, walk with me. Sometimes we take a break, we celebrate, and we don't keep walking, and that's where he catches us, the liar. So what are some of the things you could share with us? How does a typical alpha respond to the temptation of weakness and the temptation of believing lies?
One of the greatest alphas of all time is someone named Winston Churchill, the man who stared down the tiger of the Nazi Germany and had, you want to talk about someone who was attacked? Winston Churchill had people in his court, and behind him, tearing him down.
Movie, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a movie on Netflix about the war, and he's drinking all the time. But
have a little whiskey.
Drink alcohol gives you courage. He was using the alcohol maybe to make bold moves. But what an incredible leader, huh?
What an incredible leader, understanding of, want to talk about someone who was attacked, right? Every leader in the history of the world is attacked. And this is why I love Winston Churchill. His quote says, "You have enemies? Good. It means you stood up for something sometime in your life." If you ever stand for truth, again, let's talk about what we just talked about. We describe truth as a sword. It defends those who wield it, right? So if you hold the sword, it is a defense, but it is also an attack. The sword cuts. Truth cuts. It divides asunder. It divides right from wrong. So if you stand for truth, if you teach true principles, you will divide, meaning you will offend. And it is only by taking a stance for truth that you will offend people. My coaches growing up, I played a lot of football, played football in college. They always used to tell us, if I'm not yelling at you, it's because I don't give a shit about you. It's because I don't believe in you, right? Taking offense and being offended is one of the greatest gifts because it shows what you can change. It shows who you are. So when I receive hate, and I am not perfect at this is some we all struggle with, right? Because when you receive hate, there's only one thing you can do. Take a deep breath and remember, push forward. Because if you are who you really like, this is, it sounds like, a contradiction. If you are who you really are, then the world will hate you. Christ taught his disciples, he said, the world hates you because you walk with me, but remember that the world hated me first. Yes. And it hates you because you are not of the world. If you are of the world would love his own. The world loves their own. They promote their own. A lot of times they're the ones making the most money because the world loves their own. And if you are not of the world, then the world will hate you. And so it's actually only in the hatred that you're receiving that you're on the side of righteousness. It is the side of truth because you're standing for something. You stood for God. You stood for the truth. And now you receive hate. And that's why Winston Churchill said, you have enemies? Good. Because that means you're doing what's right. That means you're wielding the sword of truth. And if you wield that sword, then you better be prepared. That's why I said never drop the sword. Never drop the sword. They'll try to convince you to drop it. They'll try to tell you that you're being a bully. When you stand for truth and you tell them what they're doing is wrong, that it's a sin, that it's darkness, they'll say, you're bullying me. Of course they would. Of course they would attack you and try to reverse it on you. Just like they say, you're being prideful. I see through the lies because all lies are just a manipulation of truth. A lie cannot exist on its own. It does not exist on its own. It can only be a manipulation of the truth. Yeah. That is one of the blessings, is that there's truth in all things, even in the lies. By reading the lies, you can see the truth. By understanding the darkness, you see where the most light is held. That's why I talk about pride the greatest truth has the most darkness surrounding it to try to repel us from ever approaching it. When in reality, that is exactly where you need to go. You must charge at the greatest darkness because in there is the most light. They say the cave you fear to enter holds the treasures that you seek. In any story, the dragon, the dragon in the cave is just a representation of our greatest fears. And why would a dragon care for gold? Why would a dragon hold a princess? It has no need for it. It's just a representation of the fact that your greatest fear, a giant fucking lizard that can fly, breathe fire, any form of creation that we could come up with to make the scariest animal or scariest creature possible, the dragon is simply a representation of fear. Yeah. And the fear that the cave you most fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So the most darkness, the darkest things, the things that have the most controversy are the things that contain the greatest truth. So if you stand for that and you stand for the highest form of truth, you will be attacked more than anything, because it's one thing to say, hey guys, let's all be kind and loving, some baseline stuff, right? You're not going to receive a whole lot of hate for that. You might a little, but not a lot. As opposed to someone who stands up and says, you're a sinner. I'm a sinner. We all are sinners, but you must repent. Being gay is an abomination to the Lord. Not having a family. Here's the thing. I say this all the time. A man or a boy, I should say, I don't care how old he is, 30, 40, who is not trying to build a family is honestly one of the worst things for society. And it needs to be taught. A man who is not building a family, who's not building a kingdom, one of the worst things for society, and as a matter of fact, it's described as a menace to society, right? These things are really hard to accept. That's why we say the truth is really difficult, and yet the truth is what will set you free. Everything is centered in truth. Freedom, greatness, who you become, it's centered in truth, and yet is the most difficult to find, the most difficult to stand in. It is the great battle of our lives. It is the great battle of our existence. And yet it, just like everything, it exists whether you like it or not. Truth is truth. Whether you believe it or not, it stands the same, right?
And, so many men don't believe in that today, and they carry the seed of God like it's nothing, and they give it away.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nothing. And it's the only thing. I mean, if you put 100 LGBTQ, whatever, in Ireland and 100 men and women, you've seen that?
Yeah.
100 years from now, one of the islands is going to have plenty of people and the other island is going to have plenty of bones. And this is something that's super easy to understand. That's something that it's an actual truth. And I don't understand why people would pretend that it's not a problem.
Because they have fear of offending. They fear man more than they fear God. They are turned the wrong way. They're not facing God, they're facing man. And they fear the retribution, because I will say the LGBTQ community, they will attack you viciously. They will. And they'll say and do things you're like, damn, what is wrong with you? Holy you are evil. And it doesn't matter. Evil's evil. And you know what? You're going to put on this podcast, and I guarantee you're going to get a lot of people pissed. There's too many Christians, by the way, and who are standing for LGBTQ because they take this belief that Christ is all about love. Well, then you don't understand love.
Christ has the two wings, truth and grace. But grace does not cover truth. Truth is like a knife.
Yes.
And grace heals it. So without truth, you can't have grace.
Mm-hmm. Again,
grace without truth is not Christ. That's covering darkness. That's covering evil. He would not do that. Mm-hmm. He wants the truth first, cut with the knife. The truth hurts. Every romantic song teaches us that.
It does.
And the grace heals. It heals the villain. It heals the hero. It heals everyone. But first step is the truth. And that's what those Christians do. They pretend that grace covers truth. The grace is senior to truth. Nothing is senior to truth.
Truth is what governs all things. It is the light inside of all things. It is the great connection that binds the atoms, that binds all the elements of the universe together. It is light and truth and power that harnesses this entire existence that we see around us. So you think you're going to determine truth, or does truth determine who you are? It's not the other way around, right? And again, it's only through fear that people, they look at their business like, oh, I don't want to say that because then my business might get canceled, might lose money. Where are you facing? You're facing the wrong way. I don't care the hate you receive, and God doesn't care either. It is still your duty, no matter what, to stand for truth. It doesn't matter how hard it gets. It will always be your responsibility. And that might mean that you're labeled as a bully. That might mean that you're labeled as a homophobe. That might mean you're labeled as a racist, as a murderer. Even I've been called a murderer somehow, a scammer, whatever it is, they'll label you. It might, and it's probably wrong. They taught about Christ. What did they say about him? The names that they called Christ, right? All the same. It doesn't matter what the world says about you. What matters is that you discover and seek after truth and that you live in that light. Nothing else matters.
I love what you said about the dragon and the fear. In the Orthodox Christianity, there is a Saint George who's the slayer of dragons. So maybe that's the symbolic part. He's associated with bravery, standing up, protecting, and providing peace. Do the Chinese and the Japanese know what the dragons are, or do you think they're just covered in fear?
Discovering fear?
Do you think that they use, because the dragon is huge for their history, right? Like most Asians, like Japanese, Chinese, they worship dragons. And is it fear that they're unfortunately covered by, or is it them realizing that the dragon is fear, so they use it as a monument, as a reminder to stand against it?
I think it depends on the individual you're speaking to, right? Because here's the thing about symbols. The symbol of the dragon, the symbol of of the pyramid, even the symbol. God speaks to us in symbols. Like what on the bottom on your shirt, those are just symbols. We call those words. But all those are symbols that we associate energy. I am prepared, right? If someone else were to read that or to look at those symbols from, say, China, they don't read that. They don't understand the symbols. Just like I look at Chinese and I don't understand their symbols. But symbols are nothing more than energy, ways that we communicate energy, right? And so people can associate whatever they want, whatever they choose with whatever symbol. Someone could look at a dragon and think it's inspiring, this great, thing, and that's the choice they make. But the people who teach using the dragon, when the dragons were first used, in these stories, right, in these parables, you could call them, right, they were represented as fear. Now today we use it for whatever, it depends on who you're talking to, because it's just a symbol, right? And we associate whatever we want on symbols. And God speaks to us through symbols because the symbols connect an energy that speak to our souls, right? Our souls don't communicate through words. Is like what I'm doing right now with my mouth is I am literally just creating vibrations. And because of these vibrations and because of our agreement and our understanding, learning, you understand what I'm saying. But what I'm saying doesn't matter. It's the energy behind what I'm saying. And that's all everything is. That is the communication that God needs. That's why our spirits and our souls speak to each other. That's why you get a feeling around somebody and deep in if they're a good person or a bad person. And if you're in tune with your soul, or what we call the spirit, then you can communicate on a higher level than anyone else could. And that is ultimately the highest form of communication, is through vibration, energy, and light. Because all energy is light. So again, we're talking about light. We're talking in this thing flickering behind me, right? We're talking about light. And so the association of the dragon depends on what people think. Because by the way, the serpent, a lot of people see the snake as the symbol of Satan, when in reality, actually the serpent is the symbol of Christ. But Satan will appear as a serpent to change the energy of the symbol. The symbol of the bull, by the way, was a symbol as associated with God. But a lot of people associate the bull as a demonic symbol, right? There's the lamb, which we associate with Christ, and then the devil symbol is the goat. The devil always manipulates every symbol. Every symbol, by the way, the pentagram from the Jews, the triangle star, if you flip it upside down, it's a symbol of the devil.
Yeah,
the upside down star?
Everything belongs to God. It's just the devil is stealing it, trying to create new definitions for it.
Exactly. That's the key. The new definitions. What did the devil do to the word pride? He created new definitions, a new energy around it. That is what manipulation means. Yeah. Manipulate or to lie. That is what I mean by a lie cannot exist on his own. The devil does not create. He manipulates the truth. So he doesn't create on his own. He cannot create anything that is separate from the truth. All lies is a manipulation of the truth, a twisting of the truth, whether it's simply twisting it upside down or trying to change the meaning of it, changing the meaning of love, changing the meaning of humility, changing the meaning of pride, changing of the symbols. This is the great battle again. So do we communicate and do we seek after truth just by learning through symbols, or do we seek after a higher knowledge by being taught from on high? by being taught from the Spirit of God and being taught what's right and wrong. And we can only do that by becoming in tune with God himself, to be spoken to by God. That is why prayer is so essential. Prayer is aligning your soul with God and letting him speak through you, speak to you, speak into you. Being aligned with the will of the Lord is to be aligned with this power. And that is how you overcome the world, is you do not seek after learning of the world. You do not lean unto your own understanding, but you lean unto the higher understanding. You don't lean onto, well, this person said this and they're pretty smart. You got a feeling. That feeling was from the Spirit of the Lord that told you something else. No matter what you are told in this world, that feeling is what governs all things. That feeling, that spirit that speaks to you, is the wisdom you must seek after. That's why when someone listens to the word, when it listens to what things I talk about, and they say, oh, hear pride, or they hear humility, and these things that are changed over time because we allow them to change, because no one stands up for the truth. When someone comes along who is an agent of the devil, an agent of chaos, and they start to change the meaning. These pastors who are out there teaching the new definition of love they're not fighting for the truth. They're fighting for the darkness. Because how do demons and the devil, how do they appear? They appear as angels of light. It's taught in the Bible, it's taught all around that they don't appear with devils and horns, even though that's what he wants you to think he appears as. They will appear as angels of light. They will appear as if they love you, as if they care more about you than even God does. And, we know better than them, and we know what you want. This is more loving and this is more kind. That is the whisperings of the evil one. That is how the darkness works. That is the difference. And that's why we talk about symbols and how symbols are given to us from the very beginning, right? Yeah. But we freak out over these symbols because we have allowed the darkness to surround it. That's what I mean by these symbols are always surrounded by the most darkness. That symbol could be a word, it could be an actual symbol, but the ones that carry the most darkness are the ones that contain the most truth, because it's a way to propel you away from it, right? To keep you.
What belongs to, this is a great perspective. What belongs to the devil must be investigated, because it once it was God's. He stole it, he changed it, and all these pastors that are bringing this flexibility in the church. This is blasphemy. That's the definition of blasphemy is when you lie about who God actually is.
Yep.
It's not when you say, oh, geez, that God has sense of humor. He knows your heart. But when you lie to a bunch of people, kind of like there was a man who lied to the Orthodox Church. His name was Augustine, a couple hundred years ago, and he said God is always in control. And that's why Orthodox Christians are afraid of God. And it's not that awe where he's the God Almighty, the way David had respect and fear of God, but it's this punisher that's in their mind. One way to steal their relationship. And it's just, you're absolutely right. We're tolerating these worldly definitions that came from the enemy into the church without protecting the truth, without protecting his word that has been final.
Yes. That's what it means to be a protector of the truth.
If we believe that new definition, we're laying down our sword, and what do we get instead? We get a paper sword.
Yes, we get lies. That's why we are commanded to defend the truth, to fight against the lies, to stand for truth, and to declare what is the truth so no one else would be misled. That's why it's so critical, because, of course, how else would they mislead us? It's not that they're attacking us physically. They're misleading us off the path. And the way we fight that is we fight it with truth and declare the truth, no matter if it offends. Because truth is truth, and it's the only way we can return to him. It's the only way we can be free.
And he said, you will do greater things than I have. And we feel like in a more challenging times, we're not. We actually have some protection. Imagine during his time, during Jesus' times, these Romans, they did not care, man. They would whack you for nothing. It was way worse back then. It was way easier to die. The life expectancies were the cost of life wasn't as protected as what it is now. So we have more power. We have more tools. We have more ways to unite and connect. And that's why we need to stand for the truth.
Think about our day today. On this podcast, technically, we could be speaking to millions of people. Like, if this were to go viral, there could be millions of people who watch this. Millions at once. At one moment, you could speak to millions. What great responsibility is now placed on our shoulders to speak As
Yeah.
opposed to back then when they spoke, it was important. Yes, of course it was important to speak and to write these things down so we'd be taught for future generations and the millions to come. But today, in this moment, when you speak, when I speak, we could influence millions.
Absolutely.
So much more responsibilities placed on our shoulders to actually speak the truth and defend the truth publicly, not just at our, oh man, I think he's wrong. I watched that TikTok video. Yeah, he's not wrong. He's wrong. I'm going to put that down though. No, you are compelled to speak against. It's not enough to just believe the truth. You don't believe the truth unless you defend the truth. The truth compels you and wills you to act. Because if you don't act and you don't defend, you will lose the truth. You will not be worthy of it. You will lose the light within you.
Even if it costs your life.
Especially if it costs your life.
That's why you give your life up front.
Yep. That's why you put off the natural man, the enemy to God. That's why you reject this world and this life. That's why you are born again in the light. You are born again in Christ to give your life for his and for the God above, the King of the universe. We give our lives to him. That is the definition of living in the light.
And whether you're a believer or not, Timothy 6:7, I think it was, says we come with nothing, we leave with nothing. And that's a universal truth. I don't care what you believe in. We come with nothing and we leave with nothing. So overachievements stay here in the world. And that's why I think it's a test of character. And people who take this lightly are going to have eternal regret versus internal peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so happy that we are so aligned. We're like on the same frequency. And you have this amazing name, Jeremiah. And when you were tearing up a little bit in the beginning, Jeremiah was just like you, kind-hearted. He loved so strongly, and he was so hungry and thirsty for God. So, do you know the story about how your name came along? Were you named after the prophet Jeremiah, or was it a different story?
How did you know? I'm actually curious. How did you know to ask me that question? I'm just curious.
Names are very meaningful to me. I think that, my name is Velko, so it means the greatest day. That means great. Velko Velik in Slovak language. And when I was growing up, I hated that name.
Yeah.
And when I was part of the world and had Orphan Mindset. And then I realized my purpose, that I am one of God's generals, and it's a meaningful thing. And now I'm going to have a son. I want to lead my son to walk in the truth, and we're thinking about names, and I want to make sure that his name has that prophetic power, because it's important how you name your kids.
Well, I'm going to just tell you right now, I'm shocked that you asked me that question, and because
I prayed before this for God to lead that interview, so it's supposed to come out.
Yeah. When my mom was pregnant with me, she had a dream that someone appeared to her. And she described this person as someone who's going to war. She said she recognized him and she loved him, but not the way she loved her husband, but in a deeper love and as like her child. And person walked up to her and gave her a kiss and started to walk away. And she reached out and said, "What's your name?" And he turned and he looked at her and he said, "My name's Jeremiah."
Wow.
And he repeated it 2 more times, so 3 times. And then when she woke up the next day, she went to the Bible and she opened the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5. And that says, "Before I formed thee in the womb, I knew thee, and I sanctified thee to be a prophet to the people." So that's where my mom has always taught me that I named myself. Came to her and I named myself and I told her what my name was.
That's so powerful, brother.
So yeah, I've never talked about that ever. That's why I asked you just asked me that, because I don't think I've ever talked about that publicly.
Questions, and especially when because Jeremiah was so strong, and at the same time he was not
A lamenting prophet. He
the whipping
begged God not to have to do it.
And God spoke to him directly in a way that he spoke to Moses. He spoke to very few people like that, maybe a handful of people, and Jesus included. And it's just a powerful, because I always pray to have this direct dialogue with God on that level. That's been my dearest prayer, just to have very deep, meaningful relationship with him, and to be aligned with him, and to hear from him, not from anyone else. And he's one of my favorites, Jeremiah, and I was like, wow, I hope that his name is connected to that. And that's such a powerful story. women have this amazing ability, like the gift of intuition, which I think is another word of the way God speak to us.
It is the way.
It's the way. It's when you know something,
Hmm.
you know it's true with your entire being, and you don't know why and how, but you stand for it. And moms have that intuition. Moms can say, don't go there, and don't do that. And my mom has that strong intuition, and every time when I went against her intuition, I've suffered consequences. And
Yeah.
your mom was confident that this was you because she felt strong love. That's amazing.
It's funny what you just talked about, that knowledge, without a shadow of a doubt, right? When you receive that intuition, that is what I mean. When it's confirmed to you from above, from on high, who you are, and you gain that knowledge of who you really are, not just because, oh, I know who I am. No, 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 no. You have gained a knowledge, a depth of knowledge of who you are from above, confirmed to you by God. When you're given that, it is the greatest blessing of your life. It is also one of the greatest burdens,
Yeah.
because now you know. And now there's no other path for you to walk than that which you have been called. And anything else would be a failure of your life if you do not walk the path that God has foreordained you to walk. So the truth is, yes, is a great blessing, but it is also a great burden to bear. But also the burdens is how he shapes the diamonds. The burden is how he molds us. And it's only through gaining more truth and more light that we can become molded into who we were meant to become.
That's what life is. It's a journey of good and bad that we must embrace because we don't want to change it at the end.
Yep.
At the end, all you see God's wisdom at the end. That's why another thing I feel like today's Christians are really dropping the ball. And you were talking about self-hatred, and I love that you talked about that in the victimhood, and that doesn't come from God. It's just God. One of his everything is genius in his design, but repentance is such a genius tool that he gave us to it's a checkpoint, it's a refreshment, and so many Christians don't know how to repent, how to truly go back to the source of love, go back to take a shower, which he has unlimited repentance, unlimited forgiveness for us, unconditional, and he forgets and forgives, and we don't do it properly. We don't change our ways. We repent, the pain is there, the weakness is there, and we don't get too much education from the church on those basic things that God is teaching us. And instead, we get a washed version of hybrid between what's acceptable from the world. And like during COVID, all this hypocrisy about churches being closed and spiritual leaders not standing up. I mean, in some towns, they did and they prevailed, they won
Mm-hmm.
because they stood up. So many churches just closed down and they surrendered to the world. And we're not given the tools sometimes. And that's why we have to go straight to him. But it's so hard for new Christians. And I think the fear also creates a lot of believers because a lot of people are like, oh, what do I do now? This doesn't work anymore. I need to maybe find God. I need to give God a chance. A lot of times we lack the confidence that we are teachers, we are apostles, we are prophets.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that we are, but we have much greater tools now. And have you tapped into that? Have you tapped into your gifts? Do you know which ones do you have more interest, or which one do you think the enemy is attacking more? Because that's one of the enemies. He would know what your purpose is before you do, before we know. He would cover it in shame and guilt and embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to fight shame is putting light on it. Everything is filled with light. So do you know which one of the gifts is your gift?
I do.
That's
I do.
awesome.
One of the greatest blessings in my life was not only there's no other word I can describe it as a revelation of knowledge directly from God of who I am and what my gifts are, who I am, and what I was called to do. It is one of the most sacred. It will be the most sacred moment of my life. There's words cannot even describe what that feels like. I'm living in that mission of it is my calling to literally teach this, to teach these words, and I just pray every day that I have the strength to endure, that I have the strength to endure whatever may come, the hatred I receive, and there's certainly after that revelation I received, most hatred I've ever seen in my life has come my way and will continue to do so.
Yeah.
And I just pray that I have the strength to not drop the sword.
Yeah. Well, I think that you will win at the end because if God says you're going to go over, you won't go under. He revealed himself in my dream. When I turned 30, I fell asleep crying because I'm not a millionaire. I was very ambitious
Yeah.
from the world, and he showed me my entire life, all the steps. The first thing was like, you work for me now. So I quit working. I quit being an employee. I couldn't be an employee. I was mentally unemployable anymore. And he kind of laid out how I'm going to start my business, what will be the purpose of my academy, how it's going to grow into education and discipleship ministry for businessmen, and also how I would be part of his mission to remove child abuse and eradicate sex offenders. So it's really dear to my heart. When I saw the movie, God told me clearly, how long do I have to wait for you? Like, what has to happen for you to flip and start walking into your purpose? I literally left. It was like emotional roller coaster, this movie, because I experienced it as a father. There was anger, there was regret of wasted time, of wasted lives, of wasted, how many children have to suffer before I do something about it. I clearly understood my mission and my purpose long time ago, and he's patient with us. We're not patient with him. We're
Yeah.
not waiting on him. He's waiting on us. We're equipped, and we just don't spend enough time. We don't follow his direction properly. We're just very rusty in that, and we need more conversations like this, because unfortunately it's not cool to open the Bible. It's not cool to go to church, but if people can catch us on a podcast like that, and if they could be moved, I recommend to a lot of new Christians to watch The Chosen, because I think entertainment is it's going to be a big part of this movement to catch people where they at. And it's been such a pleasure to just learn from you, and for you to share what I think you're living your purpose already, and future is bright.
Thank you.
And I think we'll be lifetime friends, because we're
I'm looking
going
forward to it. Yeah.
on the same mission. I started experimenting with this, with a gift of prophecy, and powerful the way it works. Surrendering to God, just following His direction. It's fascinating, and we need to step into our gifts and start doing the work. What does the guys that you're involved with, specifically Ballard, Team Ballard, what do they need help with? What do they? Is it because they say first step is awareness? All right, we're doing that right now. But how do we get dirty? How do we?
Number one is awareness. Number two is money.
We need to fight the rich with the tools they have.
Well, we need to fund these missions. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Money is not the root of all evil. It is the way we bring it, because that is what society's created. That is the way we bring about change, is money. My mission, one part of my mission, is to actually become wealthy and help others become wealthy, so that we can make a difference. Because all our thoughts and prayers are all great, except, well, let's take some action. It costs money to save kids. It costs money to run these operations, to put out these movies, to spread awareness, right? So they need money. And that's a hard thing for charity, even though to be coming out and ask like, oh, we need money. Like, they need money. And it's time that we make a lot of money in our businesses. We help others make a lot of money, so that we're in a position to help. We're in a position to fight. Again, a position, whether it's financially, spiritually, physically, emotionally, we must be in a position to fight in all aspects of our life. So, and they don't need us physically right now yet, but one day we should all be prepared for that day where physically we're ready to defend and protect. But secondly, is most important, awareness is top priority, obviously, but second is money. They need donations. They need financing. One of the great honors of my life was to actually finance this next documentary that's coming out. So this movie that just came out, the next documentary is called The Hidden War. And it's about what we've talked about today with MAPS and pedophilia, and the war to normalize this, and the war in Ukraine, and how they're taking kids from Ukraine and shipping them to the southern countries during harvest season. So I am the executive producer of that documentary, along with Tony Robbins.
Wow.
And that's coming out towards the end of this year. And it's things like, that's one of the greatest honors of my life, to be able to have the financial means to finance this documentary, to pay for the ability for them to produce this and to put this out there. Nothing can replace that. For me I've donated a lot. I'm not going to say how much. I'm donating a lot of money to OUR, and I know my money is going to save children. I am in the fight. I'm giving them as much money as I can, and I'm trying to inspire others to do the same. If people think money is the root of all evil, tell that to the kids who need saving, and guess what? We need money to get them out. So let's go make a shit ton of money. Let's build our businesses. Let's become who we're supposed to become. Let's speak out, and let's make the change. Become who we're supposed to become.
It's up to us. These children are hopeless, and they're counting on people like us. They're looking at us, and they're thinking, why wouldn't you help?
Yes.
Why won't you help?
The exact question I had as a kid, even though, again, my story is nothing. I had chocolate milk being poured down my throat. And yet I know the misery that I felt and the loneliness of begging, asking God, why won't anyone help me? You could imagine what a child who's being raped 5 to 10 times a day in the deepest recesses of hell on earth, what they're asking. And if we're just sitting around doing nothing, talking about it, that's it. Don't like the kids aren't going to look at us and say, oh, you talked about it. Thank you. Did you come and help me?
That's why we can't stop on the first step.
That's right.
And for those people that have that are very disciplined with tithes and offerings, maybe God is calling you to direct some of those offerings into one of those 6
Yeah.
topics, these controversial topics. If you know that this is wrong,
Yeah.
it's our duty to help with resources because we're fighting ultra rich.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We're fighting a great battle, and every war costs a lot of money. And I'll be damned if I'm not going to help finance the great war, the great spiritual warfare of our time.
Because you're gonna leave with nothing, anyways.
That's right. Yep, that's right. Who gives a shit about money? But I'll get as much of it as I can, and I'll try to fight with it as much as I can.
What is the something that you know you're tolerating right now that it's within your control? Something that it's a pet peeve that you could remove, but you haven't yet.
It's a good question. Food. I'm working my ass off in the gym. I'm getting big, but I
I
need to
know.
lean my ass up just a little bit more, a little less food for me.
Yeah. What's your weakness? Is it sweets or is it bread or is it
I'm not much.
potatoes?
I'll eat a little bit of sweets, but like I just really just I love good cheeseburger, man. Like I just gotta small details, man. Put down the fries. I'm in some of the best shape of my life, but not where I need to be, not where I should be.
You
So
think that sometimes it's like emotional, like sometimes you because if you're it's connected with some emotional stuff.
and then I know there's my own bullshit, justification of like, oh yeah, I had a great workout this morning. All right, I'm gonna have that.
Like an war.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, that's one for sure for me.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. Sometimes today I just started getting back into the routine. I've done. So you're familiar with 75 hard?
Yep, I know Andy very well.
Yeah. So this is one thing that I've finished it 3 4 times. It's almost like quitting cigarettes 3 4 times. At some point it has to be a lifestyle. It becomes having the discipline to eat clean. It has been the most challenging part.
It becomes who you are, not what you do. It becomes who you are in your lifestyle. Yeah, exactly.
We try to make it up with working out and putting ourselves into the more suffering. It's so much easier if you just eat clean.
Yeah, it can be.
It becomes
Yeah.
effortless. So that's one of my weaknesses as well. Well, it's been so amazing and been so generous with your time. Share with us some of your next moves. Like what's on the horizon now? Where do you want to be a year from now and 5 years from now? What is the big vision for you?
Well, I just pray that I can speak to more people. I just pray that I can speak on more stages, on more podcasts. I pray that I can speak to a bigger audience through social media, and to gather the strong as I have been called to do. Gather the strong, protect the weak. My hope is that I can gather more men like yourself and more men and women who believe in this vision to fight not only for the truth but also fight to protect the weak, right? So I've just launched actually my academy, and I launched my Ascension program. I've built many businesses, had a lot of success. I'm 27, already done over $70 million in sales, but it's time for me to teach. It's time for me to teach men and women how to make more money. It's time for me to teach them how to become. I've done, and it sounds interesting coming from someone, my age, but it's what I've been called to do, and I've done it, to get to that point. So my calling now is to teach, to build a community of people who believe in this mission, who are united in this front, for me to teach them and to speak to more. I just pray that I can do everything possible to get in front of more eyes and ears, to speak the truth and have the courage to speak and let those who would hear.
What would you do if you lose it all today?
Keep going, build it back again. And I've had some serious, I've had losses, man. I tell you, I have lost it all twice already. You just build it again. You build again. You start from ground zero and you keep going. There's no other way around it.
How do you prioritize your relationships and which are the people that you trust the most? Who are the people in your life that you trust the most?
It's a great question. That's been a tough one for me. I used to trust everybody. I used to have this mentality of trust everyone, and the second they break your trust is the second you don't trust them anymore, right? But now I've learned the hard way that when you give your trust freely, people will take advantage.
I agree. I came from trust no one
Yeah.
to trust everyone until they disappoint you. Give everybody, because I thought I was like too extreme by trusting no one. So then I went to the other extreme. And now I believe in expect people to be who they are.
Yeah. So, but I put my trust in my Father in heaven. I put my trust in my family, my wife, and it's going to take a lot for someone who's not one of my family or to earn my trust for me to give them my whole trust. Because I'll give partial. It's going to take a lot for someone to earn all my trust.
Who do you trust with your bank account?
My wife. My
Who
wife.
do you trust with your wife?
Me.
You're the only one.
No. Yeah. I trust her wholeheartedly.
Trust is such a weird thing.
It is.
Because it depends on who do you trust with your kids? Who do you trust?
And in today's world, probably not a lot. It is definitely best not to trust.
It's challenging to surround yourself with good men that are on the same frequency, with good community, to build a tribe that's unbreakable, men with the same values. Because we're being attacked from every single angle. The ability to stand up, it takes meekness, it takes faith, it takes all the things we discussed, and it starts with a good foundation and good leadership at home. So I'll be praying for you and your wife to be able to experience the joy of children soon. Definitely the best gift. And I'm really grateful for your wisdom, for sharing your heart, for sharing the truth of God. And I hope that we can continue our conversation in the future. Maybe do another one of these, track, see what our development is, continue to fight the good fight, continue to support the people who are choosing to give their life for those children. Because I used to be interested in helping homeless people and felt the need that they need to be protected. And what I found out trying to help them, because if we keep feeding the homeless, they'll never stand up and stand up in their true identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm not going to help a 35-year-old with victim mindset who's blaming, complaining, and having an excuse for everything. I need to help the children who have no hope, no adults trying to help them. And like you said, the scary part is they're being abused by adults. So they lose all hope.
Yeah.
And we need to stand up. It's time for us to stand up. So,
Agreed.
God has been leading me in that direction, and I have to do something about it. And I really want to get involved in the fight, to be a little bit more active. Definitely have made the decision to create awareness and use my platform for that. And having you on makes a big difference with your great following. So
thank you.
we stay on the same frequency. We're partners, we're brothers. If you ever need something from me, let me know, and I would always be an extension of your efforts, and I'll be expecting the same from you, because we're fighting for God. It's not for us. We're proud to make Him proud, not to make ourselves the center of the attention.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree 100%. Yeah, thanks for having me on, brother.
It's been a pleasure. Any final words for viewers?
Be great or be nothing. Those words my father said changed my life, and it's words I hope will change your life. There is no in between. Being average, being mediocre, lukewarm is the enemy. Seek after greatness. Seek after who God called you to be, or nothing else.
God bless you, brother.
You too, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you.